Hello everyone, my name is Godfrey Devaputra, serving Maharaja Institute of Technology, Mysore in the capacity of Associate Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. I am here to deliver a series of lectures on a subject called as Operations Management, which is prescribed as per the syllabus from the University of Vishweshwara Technological University, Belagavi, for 6 semester students as an elective with a subject code of 18 ME 56, and this subject carries a credit of 3. Before we get into the content of the syllabus, let me highlight the overview of this particular subject. So this course is an introduction to the concepts, principles, problems and practices of operations management. Its emphasis is laid on managerial process for effective operations in both goods producing and service rendering organization. The introduction to the steps involved in planning, scheduling and control of activities that transform various inputs into finished goods and services, with importance given to primarily understand the structure, characteristics and functions of production systems and business organizations. The topics covered include operations strategy, process design, capacity planning, facilities location and design, forecasting, production scheduling, inventory control, quality assurance and project management. The topics are integrated using system models of operations of an organization. It gives the provision of an exposure to the various levels in an organization environment, emphasizing on challenges and situations arising within the system and equipping the student with the ability to evaluate social and economical environments of various business organizations. The course helps the students to analyze any system globally, create and present effective oral as well as written forms of professional reports and solutions. With this overview, which basically speaks about the history of the subject, the very purpose of its existence in the curriculum, these are some of the outcomes which a student is expected to gain at the end of the semester. Here I have written down the course outcomes. First one being the outline the concepts and scope of operations management in a business context, recognize the role of operations management among various business functions, analyze the appropriateness and applicability of a range of operation management systems, models in decision making, appraise the range of strategies for improving the efficiency and effectiveness of organizational operations, evaluate a selection of frameworks used in the design and delivery of operations. These are some of the outcomes which a student is expected to demonstrate at the end of the semester. So with this, in order to achieve this in the personality of a student, the syllabus, keeping in mind the constraint of the time, it is divided into 5 modules. Module 1 speaks about introduction, and it introduces basically to how the purpose of operations management that a student needs to study, how he studies, how operations management is likely to help him, and the fundamental principles of productivity. Thereafterwards, in the second part of the module 1, student is likely to study the various aspects of decision making along with its characteristics and its various domains. Module 2 speaks about forecasting, wherein the mathematical tools that is used in the business organization to forecast for the demand are studied. In the third module, a student is supposed to study as per the syllabus decision making with respect to capacity and location, keeping in mind all the parameters or all the characteristics that is there with respect to capacity and location planning. In module number 4, student is supposed to study the various aspects of aggregate planning and master scheduling, and then in the final module, that is module number 5, student is expected to study how material procurement takes place in an organization through material requirement planning, as well how the goods move from one to the next step in the form of supply chain management. There must be some objective with which student is supposed to study all of these things. So emphasis with respect to objectives, the very purpose a student is supposed to study this particular subject, as he is likely to become a mechanical engineering professional when he starts pursuing his career, there are certain objectives. First most important objective is to get acquainted with basic aspects of production management, to expose the students to various aspects of planning, organizing and controlling operations management, to understand different operational issues in manufacturing and services organizations, to understand different problem solving methodologies and production and management techniques. To elaborate on these objectives, one of the core areas wherein a mechanical engineer is expected to serve as he pursues his career is in the area of production. He is expected to understand the end-to-end encryption, wherein he is supposed to understand the input parameters and the output parameters and link the chain. He is also supposed to link the chain by using various aspects of planning, organizing and controlling. He is also supposed to understand the issues which are likely to arise during the course of the work, as well extend these aspects to the service organization also. Engineering is about problem solving, so therefore a student is supposed to understand how problem is supposed to be solved by using various methodologies. As is evident from what we have discussed so far, operation management as a subject needs to be defined first. Before we start trying to understand how we can define operations management, by the way, there are a number of definitions for operations management written by a number of authors. Even before we try to understand those definitions, let me put across the meaning of operations as a word from the operations management perspective. Operations means the actions and decisions made by participants and members of a business that affect the production, distribution, service management, etc. needed for a company to function that requires the use of resources and assets. If I elaborate on this definition that they have given only for operations, parameters such as production, distribution, service management, etc., which comprises of a number of parameters which happens in an organization, is simply put up in a small little definition for operations. So therefore, the emphasis here that I am putting across is to understand, at least on the surface level, at the abstract level, the manner of importance that needs to be given for the field of operations manager. Operations is also the work of managing the inner workings of your business so it runs as efficiently as possible, whether you make products, sell products or provide services. Every small business owner has to oversee the design and management of behind the scenes work. So here, behind the scenes work in an organization comprises of a number of parameters, like if I have to simply give you certain examples wherein this operations operations as a single word comes into picture: procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, customer service, information technology, quality assurance, distribution, and so on. The list goes on. So thereby understanding that the operational tasks are the mission critical activities and department possesses those that possesses this are given precedence over all the other departments. Non-operational tasks are everything else. So operational tasks are those fundamental tasks which basically make or break a business. So moving on, operations as a single little word is a set of activities that needs to be accomplished in a business organization for a business to run smoothly. If this particular aspect is not taken into consideration or given due importance, the likeliness of the business failing in a very short period of time is very much more. Now, the other part of the definition is the word called as management. Management is fundamentally defined as coordination and administration of tasks to achieve a goal. Whatever the goal may be, to achieve that particular goal, you need to coordinate a lot of activities, be it marriage planning or be it a cricket match or be it a football match or be it advertising or filmmaking or anything, name anything. If you have a goal that you are intending to achieve, So in order to do that, you are supposed to coordinate a number of activities. Not simply coordinate the activities, but at the same time you are supposed to administer what those components of that particular system are supposed to do. So therefore, management has 5 basic principles. First is planning, organizing, staffing, directing and controlling. Let me in very brief highlight the elaboration of these philosophies or the fundamental principles that we have in management. Planning is a process of thinking about the activities required to achieve a desired goal. This is fundamentally very, very important for an engineer. He is supposed to plan the activities, oversee what are the activities, that is, what are the things that is likely to happen in a particular project, regardless of the magnitude of the project. It is the first and foremost activity to achieve the desired results. It involves creation and maintenance of plan, such as psychological aspects that require conceptual skills. The planning phase, I emphasize that planning is supposed to be one of the most sought after or most important for any kind of managerial activities, because if the planning is done properly, then 99% that particular project is already a successful one. Okay, moving on, the second most important aspect that we have, and before I forget, this planning is divided into a number of different kinds of planning. One is operational planning, that is how things needs to happen. Strategic planning, why things needs to happen. Tactical planning, when it needs to happen. And contingency planning, what if something goes wrong. So these are the 4 different aspects in planning that needs to be visualized even before a project can kickstart. The second most important aspect that comes in planning is something which is called as organizing. Organizing is the function of the management that involves developing an organizational structure, allocating human resources to ensure the accomplishment of objectives. Most of the times this organizing is directly influenced by the scale of the organization or the scale of the project that we are speaking about. The purpose of the organizational structure is to establish a form so that they may better work together to achieve the enterprise. Here, staffing has not yet taken place, recruitment has not yet taken place. Here still in the planning stage, we are trying to organize, if I am supposed to accomplish a particular goal, what is the best possible organizational structure that needs to be in place in order to achieve the goal. After this organizational structure is formulated, then comes staffing. Staffing refers to the process of finding the right employee with appropriate qualifications or experience and recruiting them. The staffing process is a systematic attempt to implement a human resource plan by recruiting, evaluating and selecting qualified candidates for the job position in the organization. Most of the times you would have come across a number of organizations wherein they would have failed because they have not the right kind of candidates in the right kind of responsibilities or heading the right positions. So if you want the organization to reach its desired goal, you are supposed to have the right kind of human personnel. Next most important thing, when you have the number of people in your organization, you already have a plan, you already have organizational structure, now you have recruited people, now what they are supposed to do, you are supposed to give them something which is called as direction. Directing refers to the process or technique of instructing, guiding, inspiring, counseling, overseeing and leading people towards accomplishment of organizational goals. See, I keep mentioning something which is called as organizational goals, which is already set beforehand. Maybe it is a for-profit organization or a non-profit organization, regardless of what kind of organization we are speaking about, the goals are predefined, it is preset. So in order to reach the desired goals, you are supposed to orient all your people towards performing the delegated tasks or the assigned tasks. Here, in human resource management also, this is one of the stressed on important aspects, because most of the times the tendency of a human being is that we deviate from what we are supposed to do. So therefore, this affects how an organization performs. Even though directing, if it is not done properly, no matter how effectively you have done the planning, no matter how wonderfully you have done the organizing and the staffing, if the direction is not given properly and if they are not followed properly, then no matter what you have done, everything is a failure. Last most important thing is, even though this may sound not so relevant, but in an organizational structure, controlling is one of the most important parameter. It can be defined as that function of a management which helps to seek planned results from the subordinates, managers, and at all levels of organization. The controlling function helps in measuring the progress towards the organizational goals and brings any deviation and indicates corrective action. So therefore, management as a single word, it comprises of planning, organizing, staffing, directing and controlling, and I have tried to elaborate on all of these things very briefly. Now putting these two words together, something is called as operations and the other one is called as management. Putting them together, we can define the operations management as a process of effectively planning and regulating the activities of that part of an organization which is responsible for actual transformation into finished goods. So the people who pursue operations management are most likely to end up as operations manager, which is one of the key positions in any of the organization. So here, as is mentioned in the definition, it is the process of effectively, not simply planning, it is the process of effectively planning and regulating the activities of that part of an enterprise which is responsible for actual transformation into finished goods. It need not always be goods, it can also be services also. So regardless of whether you are speaking about an organization which produces some tangible goods or that which renders some sort of a services, this definition holds good and holds a key importance in the survival of any kind of business organization. Now, moving on, let me highlight the importance of operations management. We have known a number of organizations which have failed in our local community. For example, like the company called as Java had to tune down their business in the late 80s and the early 90s because of some key factors which did not work well in the top management. Top management also includes operations manager. We have the plant location for Mahindra and Mahindra plant which was located in Mysore in the late 80s, but even though the structure was built, the infrastructure in terms of machinery never came because of a number of reasons. So dealing with these kind of, I am giving you examples which is locally available here for us to understand that something went wrong, some decisions were taken wrong. Okay, so the importance of operations management is that all aspects of business depend on operations management. It has the capacity to plan, direct and encourage the manufacturing of goods and services. To be able to compete in an ever-changing market, operations manager must be able to work efficiently and productively to maximize profits, which are the main determinants of business survival. So going by the statement which I have stated right now, here operations manager are basically like captains of a show. These guys are like an engine to a car. These guys drive the vehicle, drive the organization. So therefore, these guys are supposed to be updated regarding what is happening in the actual world, the technological world. Whatever the advancement that is happening in the technological world, that needs to be updated to these guys. And these guys are then supposed to propagate all of those information to the lower down the hierarchy. So fundamentally what I am trying to tell you is that the people who in the organization are looking up to the operations manager to lead the whole of the organization. Operations management can influence customer service, product and service quality, proper functional methodologies and competitiveness in the market. Technological advances and profitability, failure to manage the company's operations will cause significant losses for the business. As I have already stated in the examples, in several of the cases, because of the failure of the top management in the form of operations manager to take appropriate decision, a number of organizations have already failed. So moving on, to highlight the few roles of operations manager or the subject as a whole, The fundamental activities that are called as major activities that needs to be taken care by operations management is to convert the available capital into physical resources, raw materials required for production. Second most important activity is to convert the physical resources into saleable goods and services. Just to elaborate on how this is supposed to happen, first is to forecast the demand, to arrange the things, to arrange the services, to produce goods at minimum possible cost and time, to produce goods at right time and in sufficient quantity, to produce goods of acceptable quality, to effectively utilize all the factors of production service facilities, to also take strategic level decision concerning the decision of production and production system. So fundamentally, in order to take care of those two major tasks which I stated earlier, an operations manager is supposed to be equipped with a number of tools like forecasting, capacity planning, aggregate planning, master scheduling, material requirement planning, so on and so forth. The list goes on. So these tools are of utmost essential for an operations manager to perform effectively. It is always important to know the past of the subject or the path through which a particular course of study has come into existence. Just like this particular statement is true for the whole of the thing in life, especially true with respect to the development of operations management. The reason is the very purpose of any of the engineering aspects is to increase the comfort of human life. No matter what inventions that we speak about, they have all been done in order to improvise the manner in which human beings have felt comfortable in their livelihood. So the whole of the process, like even if we go to Stone Age also, people would have tried to make tools out of stones in order to help them hunt. So specifically only focusing on what is the historical development of this particular subject, operations management as a whole, it started in the mid 17th century with something which is called as handicraft era. Here the handicraft era was, the highlights of this handicraft era is when people started making crafts work by using handmade tools, not supported by machines. The later part of the 18th century, almost towards the mid of 18th century, that is the Industrial Revolution era, was already in the market, wherein this was highlighted by the invention of a machine. In particular, invention of steam engine by James Watt. Subsequently, in 1776 and onwards, number of people started thinking more on the application of this steam engine into various production activities. So therefore, here industrial expansion from the late 17th century to the mid of 18th century was a boom in the market. So therefore, the production started to happen a bit more quickly, the finance started to flow, the transactions started to happen much more rigorously, because of which there was a need for managing the activity. So therefore, after the post-industrial expansion, industrial revolution era, there was something which is called as financial expansion. Here people started transacting money for goods and services that they were getting. Fundamentally not for services. During this particular period, they were actually looking for the goods, money transacted for goods. Then people started, people such as Henry Foyle, Frederick W. Taylor, Frank B. Gilbert, all these people who are called as the fathers of scientific management, who were the early day thinkers of how the production activities can be managed better in order to make more profit. So during this particular time, the aspects such as time and motion study, work study, differential wages, motion study of jobs, etc., all of these methods, the fundamental or the core methods of the industrial management were given by these early thinkers of industrial management. So this is the place, this is the period wherein the financial expansion started to become rampant. During the period in the early periods of 19th century, because of World War II, there was a Great Depression. The market collapsed, the production collapsed, and the organizational structure all over the world that collapsed. It was not known. People could not have forecasted that this something like World War is likely to happen. So therefore, when it happened, it created a Great Depression. After that particular period, the scientific management era gave way to operation research and computer era. To be very precise, operation research was one of the techniques that pushed the decision making process to much more efficiency. People started using mathematical tools to make more efficient decisions during this particular period. And this particular period is termed as automation expansion, wherein towards the later part of this particular period, computers were invented and they were used widely to collect the data, organize the data, analyze the data. So therefore, the effectiveness of the decisions were realized during this particular period. So therefore, now as you can see here, this particular line diagram is also in the other axis of this particular diagram, there is something which is called as increased productivity. I have not yet introduced something which is called as productivity at this point of time, but still it is the measure of what more we get from little that we give. That is, by inputting very less, how much more we are getting, and this is what is the rate of increase in that particular ratio called as productivity, which is happening, and it is beyond this. Beyond 2000, the age of machine learning and artificial intelligence is now subsequently helping the market become bigger. This is knowing this historical development of how this particular subject has arisen or came into existence is of vital importance, because how people thought during the handicraft era, industrial revolution era, scientific management era, and subsequent eras, the thinking was of the prime importance. What people thought and what they did with those thoughts has basically made the whole of the world more comfortable for human beings. Now, coming back to an organization, when there is an organization that we are speaking about, there are primarily three functions that needs to concretely be working really well in order for a business organization to progress and make more profit. So here, broadly, the functions are classified as finance, operations, and marketing. I have already stated, operations is like an engine to the vehicle, finance is like a fuel to the vehicle, and marketing is like wheels to the vehicle. Okay, to elaborate on what I am trying to tell you, finance is basically, it is making all possible arrangements to state the statement, finance is responsible for securing financial resources at favorable prices and allocating those resources throughout the organization, as well as budgeting, analyzing investment proposals, and providing funds for operations. So they have a huge task of trying to fuel the organization with ample amount of money allotted with the careful planning to various sectors working within an organization. Marketing is responsible for assessing the consumer. Any organization cannot function, they cannot transact any money, they cannot make any profit if there is no receiver of whatever the organization produces, whether it is goods or service. So therefore, marketing is basically responsible for assessing consumer wants and needs and selling and promoting the organization goods or services. So fundamentally, as I have told you, this finance function basically is like a fuel to the organization, marketing is like the wheels to the organization or the steering to the organization which gives the direction, operations, as I have already stated, it is like engine to the vehicle. Now that we have understood the functions within a business organization, before we try to understand what a production system really is, it is always better to know the differences that we have between products and services, or rather I would say goods and services. Production system remains the same. It is a generalized word which is applicable for both goods as well as services. First, most importantly, the differences are characterized by the very virtue of how things are perceived. For example, here something which is tangible is a goods. So on the other hand, services are not tangible. So therefore, here, since it can be held in a hand, the products or the goods here, their output can be measured. So therefore, we can always say whether they are constant, they are deviating from the expected tolerance level, etc., etc. All of these kind of specifications can be measured here. Whereas this quality here in this particular case, in case of a service, is variable. It depends from person to person. Goods can be produced, stored and used at a later stage, whereas the services has to be consumed simultaneously. Locations of manufacturing goods tend to be near the source of raw materials, whereas service needs to be produced, or the location of service organizations needs to be near the source of demand. Location need not attract the end customers. While we are speaking about organization with manufactured goods, whereas the services, in case of services, location needs to attract customers or the end users. For example, it is very unlikely to have a movie theater filled with people if it is located in Himalaya, or if it is very unlikely to have a hospital running very effectively if it is located near a very remote place. And be it an education system which provides service or any kind of services that we speak about, it needs to be near the end user. Here, since goods can be made by a person by giving certain kind of procedure, we do not need a lot of skilled labor here when we are producing goods. While manufacturing something which is physically we can hold it, you need not have person, you can always have a person who is given with certain kind of instructions using which he will be able to follow the procedure and make an object, whereas services needs to have a skilled labor. Fundamentally, services depends upon how it happens between human beings. So therefore, the interpersonal relationships comes into picture here. How do you talk with a person, etc., etc. All of those aspects comes into the picture here while we are speaking about services. Here, while we are speaking about goods, the production rates can be flexible. That is, since there is an option of making more at a certain time and storing it and using it at a later stage, we can always have flexibility here in the case of goods. While in the case of services, they have to be consumed as and when they are produced. So therefore, we do not have that amount of flexibility in case of products producing services. Inventory can be built here in this case, whereas inventory is not likely to happen here in this particular case of services. So fundamentally, these are some of the differences that I have highlighted to you. Now, coming back to the production system, I can also say that this production system is applicable for both for goods as well as for services. Regardless of whether we are producing goods or services, the operation management function holds good in both the cases, and it is the same. The manner in which the absolute performance of an operations manager may vary in terms of its day-to-day activities, but overall, the fundamental definition holds good in both the cases. So here, I need not call it as a production system. I am speaking about production system wherein production system both in terms of producing goods as well as services. This is one of the diagram that can be used in order to convey this particular information. We are going to have inputs for any kind of system that is transforming from input to an output. Obviously, you are going to have certain kind of a linkage. Here, in the case of inputs, we are going to have land, labor, capital and information. Okay. So, managing these are fundamentally very important. You are supposed to have sufficiently built-in system to manage land, labor, capital and information. All these things are given to the transformation phase wherein the conversion process happens. Now what happens to this land, labor, capital and information in this conversion process is something which is called as value addition. The end product is always costlier than the input ones. You are going to ask people who buy the products or the services towards the end to give you more money than the kind of money that was paid for the input raw materials. So therefore, here in the conversion process, something called as value addition is taking place. Okay, if we leave this particular system as it is, then there is very little room for improvement. So therefore, the goods and services that are produced at the output side from the transformation process needs to be measured in terms of various kinds of feedback. So therefore, by receiving this particular feedback at the input end, there can be made certain changes which can further improve the output of the transformation process. So this is a closed loop wherein feedback or the measurement is taken place, is taken at every single steps of this transformation process. Just to highlight a particular example, if a number of people are working in an organization, how to better the manner in which labor productivity is happening. So that means to say, if I am paid certain amount of salary, am I capable of giving more to the organization than what I am paid with? If I am simply giving back to the organization that for which I am paid to, then my productivity is 1 or maybe lesser than 1. None of the organization would like to pay more to get less. So therefore, the organization sets itself the performance measurement of methodologies to measure how I am performing. So this is only one of the examples. This can be the same thing with any kind of goods or service that we speak about. Say for example, if there is a money lender who is working, he is going to lend certain amount of money to a number of people who are having demands, then he wants to get more. Similar to banks, banks give you money, they want more. For the services that they would have actually given, they want more. They cannot accept the same amount or less amount, they want more. So there is an improvement that people are seeking in, when we are speaking about any kind of goods or products. So products or services. So therefore, in a production system, fundamentally value addition is the cost that the customer is supposed to pay. Value addition is the cost the customer is supposed to pay to the organization for having converted some inputs into some outputs.